Welcome to Charity Therapy, a podcast from Birkin Law about building better nonprofits. I'm your host, Jess Birkin. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Charity Therapy. Today, I am joined by my friend Warren Harmon. I've worked with Warren a few times over the years because, sometimes I have to help a client register the nonprofit to do business in another state or to solicit donations in other states, and he's a wizard with corporate compliance. Warren's a strategic account executive at URS Compliance, where they help nonprofits and other businesses with this kind of stuff day in and day out. Warren, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jess. I appreciate it.
So, Warren, I wanted to have you on the podcast because I get, as you can imagine, a lot of questions about fundraising compliance when it comes to multi-state fundraising. And I thought you'd be a good guest to chat about that with me. So, could you just give our listeners who may not know what nonprofits should be thinking about before they plan to fundraise in a new state?
Yes, that's a great question. Many individuals who would like to form or start a nonprofit are, very ambitious in terms of their goals and their plans, and
True that.
just really wanting to get and push their mission and purpose further. And in doing so, obviously, donations is a big part of that. Many individuals aren't really familiar that there are about 40 states throughout the U.S. that require a charity to have a license in order to fundraise or solicit. So first and foremost, the main part of my role here at URS Compliance is to ensure that our clients understand the requirements and really just educate them on that and then help them kind of navigate the complexities of compliance.
So it sounds like the thing they should know is that you may, in fact, need a license to do that fundraising before you start sending your mailers to people in another state. So thank you for that. Let's dig in with our first question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. I started a nonprofit last year, and we finally have our website up and running and ready to accept donations. I was so excited about this to make it easier for anyone who connects with our mission to donate, since we've got a pretty large social media presence. But my treasurer mentioned that now that we can accept donations from anywhere, we must register as a nonprofit in all 50 states. Is that true? I started researching how to register in Massachusetts, since I have family there and they've already donated to us, and it seems impossible that we'd have to go through this 49 more times.
Well, the good news is there are only about 40 states that regulate and require charities to have a license. And it really, again, is based off of the ask, the solicitation. So anytime you're sending those mailers, those postcards, flyers, newsletters, even sending somebody an email, and having a Donate Now button, all of those are considered a passive solicitation. So in regards to the Donate Now button, you're preemptively giving the ability for someone in any state or jurisdiction to make a donation. So most states will view that as a passive solicitation and would certainly broaden the requirements. Now, the good news is, of the 40 states that regulate this, a lot of those states actually have exemptions from filing based on certain criteria. So if you're below a certain threshold, a very common one is $25,000, which is reported on your 990, or you have less than 5 donors, you may be eligible for an exemption in that particular state. Now, unfortunately, that still is a formal process. You still have to submit some information to the state, and then ultimately they review and determine if you're eligible for that exemption. But if you are actively soliciting residents in, all of those 40 states, or you have a Donate Now button, certainly that will broaden the requirements, and more than likely you would end up needing a license depending on that.
Yeah, this is where you and I probably give different advice, because, you work for the company that registers everybody, and I work with the clients that are like, but we don't have any money. I'm just not as concerned about the donate button. I know you can find white papers from law firms that are trying to scare you into registering in all 40 states or whatever. But for me, when I'm advising my clients, I'm like, if you randomly, these people are in Massachusetts, I assume. If they randomly get one donation from Texas through their Donate Now button, I'm pretty sure the Texas AG does not give a rip about this group. I think maybe it makes a little bit of sense to just give 30 seconds on why does this even exist? And the reason this exists and why you need these licenses is because this is consumer protection. And of course, whenever there's an opportunity to solicit a donation, then people want to take advantage of that and run scams and like call the little old ladies and try and squeeze $20 out of them or get their credit card information. So the state's attorneys generals usually are the ones who protect consumers in their states. And so keeping track of like all the charities that claim to be soliciting donations in their state is one way that they can help protect consumers. So like if you randomly affected one Texan through your Donate Now button, I just pragmatically, they don't care. But if you decide you're going to do a direct mail campaign or you're going to use Facebook targeted ads or something like that, and you are targeting people in Texas, or maybe you are an advocacy organization, there's some legislation coming up or an issue that's affecting that state, and all of a sudden you're going to move fundraising efforts to be about that state, well, hell yeah. Because you are targeting the citizens of that state, and now you have a compliance obligation in my mind. But like literally like a little startup that has a Donate Now button on their website, they can't afford to do all of this work. So that's not realistic in any way. So I'm just like, if you're proactively reaching into those states, yes. And the reality is most of these state legislative acts, they were like designed before the internet existed. So they don't even account for having an email or donate button or any of that stuff. So we sort of presume that you're passively soliciting everyone, but like most of the states don't even have legislation on point.
Yeah, that's a great point. And a lot of states, there is certainly some gray area there. And again, there's certain criteria where they may be exempt from filing if that's all they do. And I know there was a group that got together back in the early 2000s that they're called the Charleston Principles. And they're really based on this whole idea of having an online platform and donations. And they had a lot of great ideas in mind, and they talked about ways to kind of regulate this. And nothing really, unfortunately, came out of that. You know, none of the ideas or the principles that they came up with were ever really codified into law. And that's, again, where it is a little bit gray area. And you're right. These smaller organizations, there's no way they can afford to keep up with registering in all 40 states. It's just simply not possible. Yeah. So we do have a lot of clients that take a more targeted approach, focus on key states, maybe it be high population, or they have a lot of donors there, and they target their solicitation specific to that. And that's where they maintain registrations at.
Yeah, right on. Let's move on to our next question. I'm a board chair for a small nonprofit that runs an after-school program, and we've been struggling for the past few years. We operate entirely with volunteers, and we hit a rough patch during the pandemic where no one was really willing or able to devote time to the organization. We still had some donations trickling in, and we did some of our activities, but I know the administrative side of things has fallen way off. We are registered as a charitable entity in 4 states, and I'm realizing we didn't file any of our renewals last year. What do we do now?
So a lot of the states actually have public databases where you can actually see whether or not a charity is registered. So understanding that you may have missed, your filings in 4 of those states, the first thing you would want to do is, go onto the Attorney General website, because that generally is the government body that oversees these registrations, and type in your charity, see whether or not you are registered and what your current status in. Those renewal due dates are also listed on these state databases as well. But in most cases, what states will do, if you missed filings for previous years, depending on how far back, they will want, previous year financials. They'll want you to complete those back due filings. In most cases, probably will assess a late fee or a penalty fee. Some states, they accrue daily, weekly, monthly, could be annually, all depends on the situation. But generally, the best way to kind of see where things are at, if you're new to this role or you inherited these responsibilities from someone that maybe left the organization, go to these websites first, take a look and see what your status is, and then kind of make an action plan from there.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I would also just add to that like, it's okay to just call. Like most of these agencies have a phone number and a real human being will answer, and you can just say, hey, I inherited this work from my colleague and I see that we didn't file our renewal and I'm trying to get us caught up. What's the process? Or is there a late fee? And you might be surprised to find that they're like, oh, just send it in. It's fine. They're not out there to like punish you. They're more often than not, unless it's Illinois. Illinois can take a long walk off a short pier. But like in Minnesota, where I live, the AG's office is very reasonable with charities that are trying to get back in compliance. You're trying to do the right thing. It's not like they're waiting for an opportunity to like crush you like a bug, or, they just want to get their reports. So don't be afraid to just call and ask whether they'll accept your report late, or if there might be a small fee, like you said. But just remember, these are like human beings, right? It's not totally a scary thing.
Exactly. And that's the thing too. Yeah, like you said, picking up the phone and having a conversation, if maybe you've received a letter from a state that you're not in good standing, the best approach is to pick up the phone, give them a call and say, look, here's the situation. And they can work with you on kind of how to correct that and bring you back into good standing. And like you mentioned earlier, Jess, really these attorney general's office are really trying to protect the legitimate charities within their state that are operating, which is why most of these filings and most of these registrations are public, because it really instills donor confidence when these organizations are registered and being proactive and trying to do things the right way.
Yeah, totally. What are our takeaways here? I think, first of all, is fundraising compliance sucks, but it's necessary for states to protect their consumers, and that's a reasonable ask. So if you're not sure, so I think like the second takeaway is if you're not sure where you need to register in order, beyond your home state, get some advice, right? Contact somebody like Warren, contact somebody like me. No, you probably do not have to register in all 40 plus states that require it unless you're like running a branch of the Red Cross or something. But you may have to register in more than just your home state. So get some advice early and often, right? That's my motto. Mm-hmm. Ask before it becomes a problem. And then, I think the third thing is keeping tabs on your registrations. What we didn't say, but I think is a really good takeaway, is keep track of your filing deadlines. Put that on a calendar as a recurring appointment with yourself on your organizational calendar that pops up a couple of months before things are due to make sure that it's taken care of. Or outsource that stuff and delegate it to a company like URS where they'll just take care of it for you and they'll ping you when the paperwork's ready to be done. But the thing I always fall back on is you got involved with the nonprofit because you're passionate about the mission, not the paperwork. So the more you can, true point. The more you can make the paperwork easier on yourself, the better off you're going to be.
I agree, definitely. And that's something at URS Compliance, that, again, part of my role is to educate. So taking a look at somebody's donor database, reviewing the last 3 years worth of history, kind of identifying those targeted states and coming up with a best practice for the organization. And again, every situation is going to be different. And this would be more curtailed towards the client, depending again on where they're fundraising at, where their donors are located at, what's reported on their 990. There's just so many nuances to go into these requirements in each and every state. And that's why there are people like myself and you to help our clients assist with those.
Yep. Ask for that advice. Warren, thanks so much for being here. If folks want to connect with you and learn more about your services, where can they find you?
Certainly the best step would be take a look at our website, urscompliance.com. You can always reach me directly by email. My email address is wharmon@urscompliance.com. I'm happy to, speak with anybody, kind of review your situation and kind of go from there.
Awesome. Folks, if you enjoyed this episode, do me a huge favor. Share this episode with a friend. Rate, review, subscribe on your podcast app. Yes, it really does help me out. I swear to you, it does. If you have a question or a story to share, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a note online at charitytherapy.show or leave a voice memo by calling 612-208-9120. I promise to keep it anonymous. Thanks for listening. All right, folks, that's our show. Be sure to follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Jess Birkin. We want to hear from you. Send us a message at our website, charitytherapy.show. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at birkinlaw.com/signup. Charity Therapy is a production of Birkin Law Office, PLLC. Our theme song is by Whalehawk. And remember, folks, this podcast is produced for your entertainment and is not a substitute for actual legal advice.